Okay, this is program number 2 in week 9. This is the Foreach loop. So this is kind of a weird little instruction that lets you access each element in an array. The way it describes it here serves to iterate over all elements in an array. So the best way to do this one is just to watch you see it in action. I think that describes it best. So we're going to write this code right here in this program number 2. So I've got some code written here, and we'll see how this works. So first thing we have here is basically create and populate an array. So remember, there's a bunch of different ways you can create arrays. This is one of them here. So an integer array called numbers, and then I'm actually just filling in the elements of the array. So I just created an array, fill it in. So it has 8 elements altogether. These are the values of each of the elements in the array. So I'm going to use this Foreach command now to basically print out each of the elements of that array to the screen. So I'm going to say Foreach, and I'm going to create a new variable, integer I, in numbers. So this is the name of the array. So I'm creating a new variable here, saying that's in the array of numbers. And then I'm going to do a command. I'm going to say console write line, and I'm just going to say write variable I. So every time, this is basically going to make a loop. It's going to run through for however long the array numbers is, and it's going to use this variable I to take the place of each element of the array for each time that it goes through the loop. So what this line here is saying is that do a write line for each element of the array each time you go through the loop. So what this should do is basically write out each element of that array. So remember, we have 2, 3, 5, 4, whatever here, and then I have a hold at the bottom. Let's just watch this run. There's nothing for me to enter here. It's just going to run on its own. Let me see what this will do. It has a write line, so this will just execute, and it basically does 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 5, 8. So it basically did a loop doing a write line. Each time that it wrote, it did a different element of the array. So 2, 3, 5, 4, 6, 7, 5, 8. So it did all those. That is basically what this command does. A couple weird things we'll demonstrate here. Let's do the same thing just to show you a little bit different. Let's do this with a console write instead of a write line. Stop this. And I'm just going to do a console write in between here. This will just create a space. Just doing this to make a blank line in between. So this is console write line. This one is console write. So it should do exactly the same thing, except the difference between the write line and the write. This one advances you to the next line after every action. This one does not. So watch what this does. So now we've got, first of all, it executed this one with the console write line. Basically puts each element on its own line. Here, each element all in a row, because it just doesn't advance it advances the cursor but doesn't jump it down to the next line. Difference between the write and the write line. Let's put a space in there and run this again. We should get this array now with spaces in between, spaced out nicely. We could also do that with a comma in there to present it a bit differently too. I'll do another example here as well. You you can also manipulate this. This is I, so that is basically the value of each individual element. So you could take that and call this I times 3, and this should give you each element multiplied by 3. So you can see when it did it this time, this second line here, that's each of these elements but multiplied by 3. So 8 times 3 gives you 24, 5 times 3 gives you 15. So basically that is what that stands for. That last I represents the individual element number, and then you can do whatever you want with that in there. So it's a way to access each element of an array and do something with it in just like a one-line written loop. Okay? So that's how we do that. And just as the other example that they're giving in the example here, they're setting up another one. They're saying, let's make a string variable or a string array. Calling it towns. And then these are just strings. Remember, each string needs to be in quotation marks. So you can make up however many of those you want. And then you can just say for each string, create a variable. We're going to call this, I'll call it T. Let's do that. In towns, console write T. So that is the element in there. So this should write out. Now let's do a write line just so they're on. You know what? Let's do console write. Put a comma in here, like that. Another console write line in between here to give us another space. Let's do that. So this should output basically these three things with commas in between them. Basically just showing you can do this with strings as well. So there we go, London, Paris, New York. Okay, so that is using the for each loop. Alright, so make a program, looks like some form of this. You don't need to do everything I did here. You can make it closer to what's in the PowerPoint. But that is program number 2.